this little demonstration, I'm using a reference image of coloured pebbles or stones and using that to practice using salt to create texture on those surfaces with a variety of different colours. And I won't be listing all the colours in the description here because really you'll be able to use any colours that you've already got in your palette for this and make some colourful choices. Doesn't matter if they don't match the reference photo. It's all about creating the texture. We do some splatter, we do some glazing, and of course we create that texture from what we might get from the salt. I've got in the description below links so that you can download and print off the reference image and a grid for drawing up the painting onto your watercolour, or the reference onto your watercolour paper. Let's start painting. I've selected this image of coloured pebbles or stones for us to try out our salt technique. I think this is a perfect subject to use the salt with because we can actually apply it quite randomly over areas of our washes, see what we get when it's dry, and then bring the shapes of the rocks in after. Now, it also means that everybody's painting can look different because we're all going to just put our paint on there randomly too, and with our own colour choices, and we'll all end up with something different. Good thing about the rocks, doesn't really matter how well you've drawn them up, whether they're accurately shaped or not. I've provided a coloured reference, I've provided a grid so that you can have a go at gridding it up to be larger if you wish, which is what I had intended doing, but I got quite frustrated with getting my grid onto a piece of paper the size that I wanted, so I gave away with that idea, and I've actually just traced my rocks onto a piece of paper the same size as an A4. That's going to make it easier for me to get going on the painting and not spend as much time on the drawing. However, I rather like this image, and I think at one stage I may just draw it up quite large and paint it again. But for our exercise today, this is the size I'm going to go with. So there's your choices. Grid yours up to be bigger, do it A4. You've got the material there to print out and assist you with however you're going to get it onto your piece of watercolour paper. We don't really even have to spend too much time making our colour choices because there's just beautiful colours in here all over. So we can just choose into whatever colours you've got in your palette there to give this a go. I'll use the colours that we set out in the course. There's plenty of choice there to make interesting colours. We'll put the salt in, then we will have to let it dry. I'm going to use my bigger salt that I bought back from my holiday in France, and you can use whatever size crystals that you like. So you've got the little salt crystals, fine table salt crystals, compared to these bigger ones. The bigger ones generally are going to make a bigger mark, but I have to tell you, like all texture things, it's no guarantee. So we just have fun, put the salt down, see what we get, and be happy with that. So let's get going. Got my drawing done, got my reference image. Doesn't really matter about the amount of graphite on my piece of paper because the darks are going to go into here. This is going to be a good exercise too in not only showing you how to use the salt, but how to mix up lovely darks afterwards to bring out the stones depth. So let's get going. So you have everything ready. We've definitely got the salt ready, water's ready, pigment's all okay. Now your choices are here to either start painting on here straight onto the piece of paper with paint, so wet on dry, or to wet your shapes first. If you wet the shapes first, they are going to dry lighter. The pigment is going to dry lighter because you will have put water here. So when we say that the watercolour pigment is going to dry 25% lighter, if you've already put more water in there as well, it's going to be even lighter again. So I think I'm going to use the spray bottle, and I will just spray. You won't be able to see it on camera, but it's gone not all over. So I've got a bit of hit and miss. I've got my salt ready. So let's have a little look. If it turns out that this particular stone here, yours doesn't come out a light colour and this one's dark for you and that one's light, or this one's red and this one's blue and that's the pink one, this is where it really doesn't matter, because this is only the reference image. This is only our inspiration, our starting off point. Doesn't matter if our colours turn out to be different from this. So I've got some water on here. I'm going to get a little bit of pink. Just put this down. Just drop it off the brush randomly. Let's dip into a bit of yellow. Drop this as well. There's that pretty blue. Here's our blue. If you're not comfortable with dropping it off the brush like this, then just paint them. I'm just trying to do this so I could perhaps keep some white that I could build up colour on afterwards. I've got to work reasonably quickly here in getting some colour down because I've got to get my salt on. So I have a bit more blue down here. And a bit more pink here. Quite a bit of pink and red over here. Now I could let all of this merge, but then I could end up with a little bit of a grey. So I'm just going to just use a bit of extra water now. So I'm obviously not going to have a blue one here because I've got it orange. So do I do something about that? Probably not. I think I'm only going to use it as a reference. I'm going to end up with different colours in different spots. Okay, so we have all the water down. We have very, very light pigment, and maybe my pigment actually might be too light for the texture to happen. So if that is the case, wick up a little bit of the excess water on here, just so it doesn't keep diluting here. Take a bit out here. By painting live on these demos and not in painting it first and doing voiceover, you're actually seeing everything in real time here, and you're seeing the things that are working and the things that are not working and how I might go about fixing them up. That's good. That's what you need to see. So here I'm just adding a bit more colour, so that the salt has got something a little bit more to play with. There's quite a bit of pink on there, so that's all right. Let's just put a few other colours in it. The bluey colour here, bit of yellow over the top. So maybe the idea is to actually get a bit more colour on here. And don't be so timid, Lorraine. Okay, where are we going here? So we've got red up here, pink over here, bit of a darker orangey colour in here, over here,
The good thing about it being quite wet to start off with is it's given me time to pick out some of these colours and play. But now, there we are. I've got lots of colour on here. Is it wet enough still to add the salt? Yes. So we put the salt in. And again, because this is a completely textured Pebbles, none of them really smooth and not showing any texture, you can just sprinkle it all over. Now, as I showed you in our exercise for doing this, if it looks like it's not doing very much, and sometimes it's very hard to tell at the very beginning, but if it is a little bit dry, it does have a bit of difficulty doing very much. So rather than add water, which is going to make these colours weaker, I think I will just drop into a wee bit more colour and flick that on there. Gosh, it looks like a right old mess right at the moment, doesn't it? Never fear. Let's see what we can do. A bit more colour here. Bit of that blue there. A bit of our deeper blue. Down here, a little bit in there, up over there. Okay, what a mess. There we go. Lots of spits and spots, salt. We will let that dry now, see what texture we've got and how we're going to then turn that into our coloured rocks. So you could get to this stage, or you could watch the entire lesson first. But given we may even have 2 goes at this, if we don't like what we've got, you could get to this stage and be letting yours dry before we carry on. Well, I'm going to be honest with you now and say that I was not patient to let this dry naturally, this painting. I wanted to get on and get my demonstration going, so I have used the hairdryer. Now, when you use the hairdryer, as I've mentioned with lots of things, you actually stop the cooking process. And so where something might have got a little more exciting, you've impeded it doing that by halting its progress with the hairdryer. However, for this demo, as I say, I want to get on with it. So it's dry. So now you can hear the salt on here. So I'm just going to quickly rub this off and put it in my rubbish bin, and then we're going to get painting those darks. So there's still plenty of work that can be done to these stones to make them more colourful. However, just so that I've got a better roadmap of where I'm going and which ones to leave light and which ones to make darker, I'm going to put in the darks in between the rocks, or at least the first start of those darks. So this is a case now of painting onto dry paper, no salt, and perhaps mixing up a slightly stronger mixture to go in for the little dark areas. So what I'm going to do, I don't want it to be black, and really when you look at it, it's not black, it's actually lots more of these coloured stones are underneath those that are on the top here. So it's really throwing all sorts of lovely colours into that dark. So what we'll do is we'll use our same palette of colours that we've used on the surface, and we'll try and get ourselves a bit of a rich dark. So I'm just going to put out some little pools of this, and I think I'll even dip into this burnt sienna over here, which I really do need to put some more out. When I said to you, if you put your paint out, it never goes to waste, it is always easier to pick up fresh creamy paint that's just been squeezed out of a tube. And some colours that I use a lot of, I get right down to the bottom of the well and almost, yeah, scraping the bottom of the barrel. Okay, so we've got some interesting colour here now, and I could scoop up different bits of it to make a really strong dark, bearing in mind that the little dark sections will end up having probably more than one layer after we've applied a bit more colour to the pebbles or stones. So starting at the top here, I'll just see if I can find an edge, and sometimes it's hard to tell that it's an edge because it's really just the depth of something lower down. I'll put in the dark and I'll just soften it a little bit so that I haven't gone totally to filling it in with a dark solid mass. And I could drop a little bit more colour in there. My brush here might be a wee bit big for this job. I might just switch to my number 8. So there's our first interesting dark that's gone in there. And because it's throwing a shadow down on this one, I could even drag that down past this one. Like so. So we've got our first little bit in there. And this stone here is on the top, so this shadow has got to come down behind here. And this red one's the one that's really out in front here, so I'm just borrowing that same bit of background colour there, and I've brought it all the way down here. I haven't even dipped into anything else yet. Rinse out my brush, soften this edge here. Knowing that I can darken that up another pass round. So if you're using a large brush for large areas, but you get into a little tight area, just switch to the smaller brush. It just makes it a little bit easier. So there's a bit of a dark up in here. Like this. Comes down between these two here. Rinse the brush off. Touch this edge here that's gone down in between these two stones here, and just soften it up into this one. And you can always add a wee bit of colour as you do it. Okay, this one is on top of that one, and you can't really see that right now, so we'll come to this side. Just bring a little line round there, wash it away, so that we can have this stone behind this one. There's a start. Now, this piece of paper that I chose here was already a small piece that was sitting around in the drawer. It's what they call rough. We talked about paper surfaces in our part 1 of the course, but this is rough texture. So as I'm painting on here, the brush is skipping over the surface a little bit, but it is really actually quite a good texture for the rocks. But I haven't painted on rough paper for quite a long time, so I'm finding it a little bit interesting. So I'm going to go to this little dark shape over here, just change my colour up a little bit. By changing the colour, even for the dark crevices, keeps it interesting, keeps it in line with all the different colours that pebbles are anyway. So I'm just filling in little triangles and little shapes of dark where I see them. So I think what I'll do is I'll put this onto a little bit of speed painting, and you can see me fill in a few more, and you'll know where you're going with yours. You just mix up a stronger mix of the colour that you've used in your stones, which basically for me is just about every one of our 7 colours, and put them down, soften them where it can help with the casting of a shadow on a rock, and just follow the pattern that you can see in your reference image for the shapes. Don't worry if your colours are different. You are now looking at a little triangle shape here, a little couple of triangles on top of each other there, a little shape there, this part here, round here, over here, to put the darks in so that we now see our stones are on the top from our background. So I'll go on and get all my darks in, and then we'll be back to do a bit more work on the stones themselves. Well, it's slowly coming together as I'm adding the darks in between the stones. I've got a few more to do, and what I've tried to do is just to vary the colour that's in between, just by mixing up combinations of the blues and the reds, sometimes a bit of the burnt sienna, just to make some interesting darks. Because sometimes when you see something and you think, oh well, it looks, even if it was supposed to be black, it would be very boring just to paint things totally black. We try to make them as interesting as we can, even when they are dark parts in shadow areas. So by mixing up all of these lovely colours together, sometimes with more red in, sometimes with more blue in, you get quite an interesting painting of variety. So let's just quickly continue with this dark areas in between, and at the same time looking carefully about which stone will I let, or do I see is in front and which is behind, and using that background part colour sometimes to drag round the edge of the stone, this one here, around the edge of the stone, and rinse off my brush just with a damp brush, touch this side of it here. So I'm here, I'm going to try and get this bit of colour here to come around here to put that stone in front of this one. You don't want it to look just like a line round the edge, so if it looks too much like a line, add a wee bit more to bring it out a little bit wider, add the water to soften it away, there, which is better than just making it look like an outline. Okay, so not very many more of these to do. What have I got up over here? So I've got, sometimes it's hard to see what you've got going when you've made your colours different than what's here, which is what I've got. But if you still just follow this as the roadmap for at least putting in these dark shapes, regardless of what colour what colour your stones are. So this one's up here, comes down to meet this one here. Use a little bit of that to come over to this side. So you see, just damp brush, put some water down close to the edge of that one, and the paint that you put down for that dark in-between area will flow into your stone, your coloured stone. Up around here, soften it on that side, soften it there. This one here are actually totally different colours on the image. Mine's the same and it's actually not standing out very well. So I will have to put something a little darker behind this one. Otherwise, it's all just blended into one stone. But there we are. It doesn't matter that that one's blue or mine turned out to be reddy orange. I will just put the reddy orange behind there. And it's looking a wee bit cut out there, so I'll just add a wee bit more pigment into that pool of water and let it travel a wee bit further out. There. Okay, so tiny bit of dark down in here. Just this little area there. Then I think we're time to have a little look at our stones themselves. I actually have put a wee bit of colour on as I've gone round with my background colour, if it's suited, to drag it out and make the stone a little bit darker. So when you've done this and you've put these in, as I say, they may not be dark enough. We won't know that until we've decided we've got enough colour on the stones themselves. Then that will tell us if we've actually got the background depth dark enough. And if we haven't, all we have to do is put in another glaze. Okay, so I really will now just have to get the hairdryer out and just dry off this background layer so that I can reassess and see where to go next. Okay, so I've dried off my painting again, and now I can really see the crevices in between the stones that are on the top. So now it's time to have a look and say, what do I need to do with the ones on the top to reinforce the colour? This will depend entirely on how your first washes went down. What sort of salt marks did you get? Did it soak up a lot of the pigment? Did you put more pigment down than me, less pigment than me? So this is where you actually have to be guided by what's happened with your first start to your painting. So I look at it, and of course if I look at this, this is all lovely and rich in colour, and mine are looking a little bit insipid. So, but I can't totally follow the colours of this because my colour has gone down in different places. But I could reinforce the colours that I've got in here because I have the shapes now, and disregard the colour that I'm seeing on here. So I think that's what I'm going to do next. And then I can decide really, do I need to do it any darker in between? Now, you may have ended up with some really lovely salt patterns on some of them and not so much on others. This one's come out really beautifully for me, this one down here. So I have to be mindful when I start adding some more colour onto that to not lose the texture that I've managed to create with the salt. But if I have some patterns that I don't like, well, of course, then I could quite easily go over them. And some of mine, the salt hasn't done very much at all because I think I was just very keen to use the hairdryer and lose anything that it was going to do. this one up here is not too bad. So I'm going to now start working on the stones, strengthening the colour, and we'll see what we get from that. So let's start with this one at the top here. So I've made a bit of clean area on my palette here, and so I can now try and dip into a little bit of fresh colour. I have actually contaminated my warm red here a little bit, so I'll just clean that off. But if I get some red and I get some of the warm yellow, so that's going to give me some orangey colour, I should be able to warm up this stone here. I don't like that little white patch that left right on the edge anyway, so I may even put a little bit of permanent rose down on top of that and cover that up a little bit. So here I am, just working on this one here. I'll drop the colours in. I'm going on dry now. I could have re-wet it all and dropped another lot of colour in, and I may well do that on some of the others, but because I just don't paint the same way every time, and I haven't painted this before, I'm making this up as I go along in how I think I could make it work. I try different things, and if I like what I've done on one, I'll repeat it. If I don't like it, I will change it and maybe put some water down first. But I'm just touching in the paint, trying to sort of still make the texture, but with the brush, and still try and retain some of the texture that the salt did create. So there. I wouldn't overwork any one stone at this stage, because however much I work this one will then dictate how much I have to work all the others, and I really don't want to make it so that I make it too heavy and then I'm going to make them all heavy. So I'll leave that one for now and I'll move on to the next one. I can see that this blue stone here has got another stone in front of it, but for me, I can't even see that. So I'll have to cool one down or warm one up. So I'll make the blue one at the back a little bit cooler, coming round here like so, and immediately that you put that cool colour down on there, that cool blue, could even mix a bit of the other blue in with it as well. Just drop this colour in, thinking of the sort of dotty pattern, soften some of it. But now that stone is definitely behind the pink one there. So I won't touch that pink one yet because I've got a wet edge there. If I touch this one and that blue runs into it, then I've abandoned the idea of that one being in the front. So I'll let this dry first before I work on that, and I'll leave that one. So the idea is to try and find one that's not going to be touching something else and create an issue. So let's jump right down to this one here, to this red one. Now I'm going to put a mixture of both my reds in this one. Drag the colour down, rinse my brush off, encourage it to come round like so. A little highlight there, so if I don't paint up in there, hopefully I could retain that. Little highlight there. And I could even get a little bit of this dark, I think I'll go with the brown, a bit of my red. just get a bit of a dark going there to drop it in here. Now this particular project, painting project, was to see how we could incorporate using salt. The building up of colours here is glazing, which we have already talked about, and we did it in our first video, Watercolour Foundations 1. But, like I say, these are exercises, but they can be very fun paintings too. So you take this as far as you want to go. If you want to paint the rocks or pebbles, stones, whatever you want to call them, and get the background in, and don't do too much more than that, that's entirely up to you. You can take the painting as far as you like. If it's coming out well, I always like to just continue pushing to see how far I can go. That's a beautiful red there, but of course it's sitting very bright up on top here, but no matter, I'll wait and see what happens when I get a bit of colour on these. So this is how I would go around building them up. So you move from stone to stone, making sure that a wet one isn't going to, you're not going to work on the one very next door until it's dry enough to do that. That's there, almost dry that I could go there. But if I just jump alternate ones, build up the colour, then go back to one that's drying, I won't fall foul of my colours all merging back in and joining all the stones back up again. So I'm going to stop there, put it back onto a bit of speed painting. You can watch a bit of me doing this, but basically I'm just going to keep building up the colours on the stones. And you need to do it according to how your salt has dried and what colours you've got there. And I think I've done enough work on my stones for this particular project. This way of working, you can keep at this for a long, long time. You can keep building up your layers on your stones, getting them deeper and deeper in colour. But when you do one, then you realise you've got to do the one next door to it, so it can go on and on and on. So you need to take this project as far as you want to have a go at doing the salt, painting darks in between with interesting colours that you've mixed up. If you like the project, you can keep going and take it as far as you can. If you find that, well, I've worked out what I'm supposed to have done here, but that's it for me, then you stop. I can see that I could just keep having more and more layers going here. What I think I would just like to finish up with this one is just to quickly show you how maybe just to add some darks into this bit here and a little bit into this one, and we'll call it done. So I'll dip into a bit of a dark green here. So I'll put my two blues together here. Put a bit of a yellow in there and see what I've got. I've got a bluey green colour, that might do. Then what I do is I'm looking at little marks and things on here, little patterns that are in the stone, and I'll just, with the point of my brush here, just really tickle around some little swirly marks, just so that we've got a bit of importance going on this really light coloured rock. Then you can rinse your brush off as always and soften some of the shapes. This is basically how I built up all of the marks and colours on these rocks. This one for me actually turned out to be reasonably plain with the salt. So sometimes the ones that have turned out to be too plain are the ones that, you know, you might have to do a wee bit more work on. So look, if I just add a little bit of blue in there, just brings up a bit more depth. Got the blue around that side. Wash it away, but I still want this one to look light. So a little bit of pinky purple in here. A little bit of the pinky purple, perhaps over here, there. I don't want to lose all the light, so I might stop on that one and I'll call him done. And the last one is this one here. And let's just see if we can mix up some sort of interesting dark that we can use for our marks on this one. Little dashes, little dots, little rows, little splodges. Put them in. If you put them in really just lightly like this, if you don't even like them, you've got every chance of being able to fade them away. A little bit more pink on this one. I can use the pink to touch the edges of those dark marks to soften them at the same time as putting in a bit more colour. So it's doing two things, softening the little dark shape that I've put in, but also adding just a wee bit more colour. Let's just get him brightened up a tiny bit here as well. Put it down. Change it from looking just like a brush stroke to softening the edges. Change the shape a little bit. There. Might not do much more than that. Let's have a tiny little bit of the green in here as well. So you make your colours of your stones, your marks, something that you like and that suits the marks that you had left from your salt. Do your darks in between. Build them up as much as you like or as little as you like. I mean, this one here could really have some texture at him. Don't forget, we can always do this type of thing. Put a little bit of eggshelly texture on that one. Always have to do it somewhere else, so we'll better just do a bit of it there. And I'm going to leave it at that. So I'll dry that off, we'll take the tape off, we'll see what we've got. And that's how we could incorporate salt into our paintings to create texture, work with the marks that we've got, build it up with some colour and get something that we're quite happy with. Well, I've dried my painting off. I've taken off the masking tape, so I've got my little clean board around the edge, and I'm quite happy with that as a an exercise. We've certainly met the brief. We have used salt for texture, we have created interesting darks, and we started with colour all over our page first and then built up glazes of paint. So we've used several techniques to render this painting, and I hope you enjoy it for your project.